Signs of life have been detected. A banging sound happening in 30-minute intervals has been detected by a rescue plane that's searching for the Titan, which is the submersible that is lost in the ocean. And just now finding out that there are 24 hours of air left.
Gosh.
24. So the U.S. Coast Guard is giving an update on the search.
Since Sunday, the Coast Guard has coordinated search efforts with the U.S. and Canadian Coast Guard, Air National Guard aircraft, and the Polar Prince, which has searched a combined 7,600 square miles, an area larger than the state of Connecticut. These search efforts have focused on both surface, with C-130 aircraft searching by sight and with radar, and subsurface, with P-3 aircraft were able to drop and monitor sonar buoys. To date, those search efforts have not yielded any results. Search efforts have continued through last night and today. Today, the vessel Deep Energy, a 194-meter pipe-laying vessel, arrived on scene with underwater ROV capability. They have rendezvoused with the vessel Polar Prince and commenced an ROV dive at the last known of the position of the Titan and the approximate position of the Titanic wreck. That operation is currently ongoing.
What about the noises that you mentioned? Every 30 minutes, I heard about the noises too. Is that not anything to do with the submersible? Whatever?
So, well, they don't know. I mean, they've heard the banging, and it was happening because you remember, and we'll touch back on this just a little bit, but there was a man named David Pogue who made this exact voyage not so long ago, and I think he sat down with CBS and was talking about it. He's since done several other interviews, and we have some audio of that, but he said that banging from the inside seemed to be something that maybe would be picked up on the drones, would be picked up by some of these planes, because that's really all that they have left.
All they can do.
That's all that they can do. And so they thought, the signs of life, that they have been hearing something along those lines, but they still can't identify exactly where it is.
So the radar can't pinpoint where that noise is exactly coming from?
Exactly where it's coming from. But they are hearing it, which is giving, I think, a lot of people, everybody, hope.
Yeah, but that's scary because now you have 24 hours of air. And you're
and that's
banging.
an approximate,
approximate. They don't know for sure
if they're panicking, if they're different health conditions.
And then the former Coast Guard Captain Andrew Norris was talking about how everyone, and there's 5 people in the submersible who they would need multiple miracles to be rescued. He says,
if you do find it, what then? The United States Navy has a command with some submarine rescue vessels, and those vessels are capable of going down and actually physically attaching to a sunken submarine and physically allowing people to be removed from the submarine. They can only operate to a depth. The most capable platform the U.S. Navy has can only operate to a depth of 2,000 feet.
2,000? This is what, 13,000 feet?
13,000 feet.
Oh.
This vessel is 12,800 feet. So the fact of the matter is that there is no vehicle or vessel in the world that will allow these people to be removed from the from the submersible itself.
The way to kind of summarize what you're saying, it sounds like, is that this would not only take a miracle, it would take an unprecedented one.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think really, I'd say a series of miracles, which would be the finding it and then, as the Coast Guard Admiral, and this is not being critical in any way, I think it's a very realistic statement. But in the press conference yesterday, the Coast Guard Admiral in the 1st District said, effect some sort of rescue. That's and so, if you find it, then respond to whatever the circumstances are you find and with whatever gear you have, and you hope that they all match up and that everything works perfectly.
Golly.
And I think, so you can't remove it. They would have to find some kind of vessel that can pull it up eventually, and that's going to take forever probably, or move it and then get it. It's it's not a good sign.
And we're going to get into it. Katie found some excellent audio of a guy that has been on the submersible before, and he does explain some of the safety and backup mechanisms that are pretty fascinating.
And lack thereof.
And
lack thereof, too,
But there's some safety protocol or some safety mechanisms that go into effect we'll get into here in a second.
But there is a, also, I mean, the what we just heard is that it's, slim to none, and that the chances, they just need multiple miracles, backed up also by a retired captain, I believe, from the Coast Guard, David Markey, talking about his thought on their chance.
David Marquet is a retired U.S. Navy submarine captain. He told that their chances of survival at this point are very low.
I'm hopeful, but I think the family should prepare themselves for bad news. I would say at this point about 1%.
Which is basically no chance.
Yeah. Well, and David Pogue was, Jared and I were watching I think it was a CBS special about the Titan, and the same kind of vessel. David Pogue was the reporter, and he walked us through and showed us what it was like to be on the Titan and what it was like to be inside. And he talks, because, I mean, you think about it, it's this tiny little vessel that goes made to go 13,000 feet deep into the bottom of the ocean. And what is it like on the inside? David Pogue explains.
Yeah, inside it feels like you're in a minivan without seats. You sit on the floor. The actual body of the thing is a carbon fiber cylinder, so the walls are curved. It's very modern looking. It has cool lighting. There's a sound system. There's a couple of computer screens, and there is one round window at the end, about 21 inches across, and when you're visiting the Titanic, you take turns looking out the porthole.
Yeah, because that window, I believe, has to be super, super thick because the pressure's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So they have like that one window.
And talk about claustrophobic. I mean, I don't even think you could entertain the idea of going down if you were.
No, yeah, you can't. You can't do it if you're claustrophobic.
There's no way. Well, David Pogue goes on to talk about how we know there are 5 people on board. So who is in charge of controlling the Titan?
There are 2 pilots, one of which is Stockton Rush, the sub's designer and the CEO. And he drives the sub with a game controller. It looks like the one you'd use with an Xbox or something. It has the right levers and buttons to go up, down, left, right, and so on. And his argument is it might look cheap and consumery, but it's a tried and true, very reliable component, and it does exactly what we need. It actually is an off-the-shelf game controller.
It doesn't make me feel comfortable.
It really doesn't. It really does not, because it's not designed for that.
No, it's not.
I know that things can serve other purposes and work out well, but it just seems like with all the technology that we have, that wouldn't be your go-to.
Yeah, we saw it. Seriously, it's like a knockoff Xbox controller.
Yeah. But David Pogue goes on to say, well, okay, not all the parts of the Titan are terrible.
I will say that there are a number of off-the-shelf parts on the submersible. He told me that the lighting he bought from camperworld.com. The main thing, though, is that the part we care about, that carbon fiber tube, the pressure vessel, as he calls it, that was designed in conjunction with NASA and the University of Washington and was intended to be fail-safe.
That's going to be an awful lot of pressure.
Does that make you feel
Literally,
better?
Yeah.
I mean, NASA's involved now.
I don't like the fact that it can't, like they say, a submarine can regenerate its own power and oxygen.
Yeah.
And this thing cannot.
Cannot.
Yes.
Yes. A submarine. Okay, so that's a really interesting point, Jared, because in the very beginning, we just were calling this a sub, and in my mind, that's submarine.
Right.
But the Titan is a submersible, and there is a difference.
The definition of a submersible is a craft that is too weak and low-powered to get anywhere on its own. It has to be carried everywhere. So we sail out to the Titanic spot on this surface vessel where the controls are and the navigation. There is no GPS underwater, and regular radio waves don't travel underwater. So all the where are we stuff depends on the control room on the ship.
And when we saw the video, it was interesting. They had divers once it went submersed underwater, and then they kind of let you go. They like detach you, and then you're just kind of floating in the water. And the guy, he's trying to steer it with this thing, but it's.
And I believe one of the things we learned, and I don't know how you do this if none of the weight or the signals go into the ocean, but somehow or another they were controlling the location via text.
Yeah, and letting them know is odd to me.
It's very odd, but we were hearing from David Pogue, who was, I believe, a CBS affiliate, or he was doing a report about actually going on a voyage on the Titan. So he's been there, he's done that, and he talks about how right before they went on their voyage, like what kind of safety protocol do you have to learn before you get to go on?
We got in-depth tours of the Titan itself, inside and outside. We learned the parts of it. There really is no safety gear in there except for a fire extinguisher and fire masks, which we practiced putting on and taking off. That's pretty much it, because there's not much you can do if something goes wrong. What you can do is rise to the surface.
And I think that he gets into some of the backup safety measures, which to me are somewhat interesting.
And there are 7 different ways to return to the surface, just redundancy after redundancy. They can drop sandbags, they can drop lead pipes, they can inflate a balloon, they can use the thrusters, they can even jettison the legs of the sub to lose weight. And some of these, by the way, work even if the power is out and even if everyone on board is passed out. So there's sort of a dead man's switch such that the hooks holding onto sandbags dissolve after a certain number of hours in the water, release the sandbags, and bring you to the surface even if you're unconscious.
So that's what's confusing then.
Right, because you would think that it would already be floating after all of these hours, that it would
Unless
already
they got stuck.
Well, that's one theory, is that it could have got
theory.
entangled with the Titanic or other something underwater.
Like it's stuck just in a position that it can't get out.
And do we not have any type of submarine or some kind of other submersible that can take a little pass by the Titanic and see if they see anything?
Well, I don't know. They're definitely doing search by air, and David Pogue talks about how hard, because you would think, oh, well, if it's floating, it's on the top, it's on the surface. But there's a complication to that as well.
Well, we really have no idea. I mean, the waves are 6 feet high. It's all white caps. The sub itself is white. I don't know how an airplane is going to expect to find it in hundreds of miles of rough seas. So for all we know, they are floating somewhere on the surface right now. And the tragedy of that is you're bolted in from the outside. There's 18 bolts that seal you inside. You can't get out without assistance from an external crew. So that would be the real nightmare scenario if they're alive and floating and unable to escape.
So they could be on the surface.
We just can't see
and
them.
still, die of a lack of oxygen because they're stuck in there.
And we just don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And then finally, I think we've all had this question. I know I certainly do. Is that we already know that the Coast Guard didn't sign off on this.
Right.
We know that the government doesn't sign off on this. So who's checking them out? Who's keeping an eye on them in the middle of the ocean?
Nobody, because these dives take place in international waters. So there's no governing body. And I will tell you that when we boarded the surface vessel, we signed waivers that would curl your toes. I mean, it was basically a list of 8 paragraphs describing ways that you could be permanently disabled or killed. So this is not a tourist company or an airline, for the masses. This is for rich, adrenaline junkie adventurers who thrive on the risk. It's a lifestyle that not all of us may be able to identify with, but for them, the risk is the life.
It made me think, Katie, that we were talking about these redundancies and like safety protocols when a long time ago, me and Josh in the Box on the show, we won some viral video contests. Yes. And part of the thing is we were filming it's not to get too far into it, but we were filming a commercial for an international cell phone company, and they took us up in planes and helicopters, and this guy named Yves Rossi, who was a Swiss pilot, he was an adrenaline junkie. He put a jetpack on his back, and he would fly like over the Grand Canyon. And so he wanted to fly between 2 countries, 2 continents, Africa and Europe, right? So we're in Spain and then also Morocco. So you have Africa, that's the shortest distance, the Strait of Gibraltar, right? And he jumps out of this plane with a jetpack on, and he's trying to fly between the 2 continents. Well, he gets upside down in the clouds. He loses consciousness. Yeah. But they had kind of a dead man switch that as it got closer to the ground, or in this case, the water, multiple parachutes would open, even if he didn't pull it.
Yeah.
And so that's how he ended up surviving. And then we were trying to find one person in like a relatively, in this area, small part of water that wasn't rough. And we had Spanish fighter pilots. We had helicopter pilots. We had like 7 or 8 aircraft looking for one guy floating with a red thing on.
Yeah, not white.
And nobody else is in this water.
Yeah.
And it took forever. Luckily, we found him. So I can't imagine the middle of the ocean I mean, it's a.
No, I just think that they would have some kind of radar or a electronic device that of detection. And the big thing is, too, I'm wondering, is this the only capability we have to see the Titanic, or do we have submarines that can go down as far as the Titanic and look?
Well, James Cameron, when he was the director of Titanic, and he went down. He went down successfully, not with this crew, I believe, on a submarine. Yes, and James Cameron calls it. Oh, he said it was one of the most. Oh goodness, his
like another planet, or
it's one of the most unforgiving places on Earth, was his direct quote about going down and seeing the Titanic one time, and that so.
Yeah, like if you, let's say
I don't know.
Let's say if you could take a person out like scuba gear, like you'd be immediately crushing and you'd probably freeze to death.
But we do have the capability. I still don't understand why we don't have a sub that just passes. I know this is costing a fortune, by the way.
Well,
But
didn't they say they had something on? Sorry, Jason.
No, I just don't understand what the surface. I'm talking about go down as deep as.
Well, the problem is that would be assuming that they're stuck. So I think what the problem is that when you go down in the submarine, if you did, that you're just looking in that area, but I don't think they're probably there anymore.
I would assume they were stuck because of all these safety mechanisms that prevent you go to the last place you think they maybe were.
If it does work.
If it does
work, because maybe they have those dead man switches, but they don't. Have they ever really tested them? In the bottom of those, probably not.
Maybe, they probably have some kind of test function.
But there's really no one that signs off on it. That's the scary part.
Yeah. And this is, the David Pogue, who went on the Titan, was saying this is for people, because I thought, how could you be so flippant about life? But I guess people, adrenaline junkies, jump off buildings and they fly in jetpacks and they skydive and stuff. But it just seems because you can afford it doesn't necessarily mean that you should.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
And I think one of the people on it, he did the Blue Origin.
Yeah.
One of the guys that's missing Blue Origin, flying to space with Bezos, right? Blue Origin. He did some other deep. It was supposed to be the deepest part of the ocean. He did that thing like last year. This is what this guy does.
Now that's
and
not
no one thinks that you're going to die though.
No,
even when you're signing the waiver, you don't think that. But
you don't, and especially I think you said, Jared, you're like, well, you paid $250,000, so you assume, well, they'll never let anything happen to us.
Right.
But they're on board. There is a father and son, and the son is 18 years old.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know.
They said that even if it's at the bottom, the submersible, that. And it's stuck. It's so cold at the bottom of the ocean.
There's that.
And if it's shut down, they might just freeze to death in the capsule or in the submersible.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a crazy situation.
There's a lot of you don't want to be insensitive, but it's just one of those things where I'm good seeing it.
Yeah.
Seeing it in other ways, but.
And we've always said we don't want to be one of the first, and this is only their third voyage ever.
Yeah.
And all the conditions have to be perfect for them to even do it.
They canceled, I think, David Pogue, the guy we were just hearing from, said that they had however many trips they had, and every single one of them got canceled. Every single one of them. Because the conditions weren't right, the water temperature wasn't right, the weather, the wind wasn't right, something was wrong with the vessel. I mean, it just had to be so perfect, and then it turns out that it's not.
Yeah. So apparently it's that the sub can only receive messages directly below the support ship.
So if it traveled away from there.
So it must have went somewhere else, right? Because that's the whole point of the message. But submarines, they have big message. They can talk to each other. I don't get it.
Can somebody look up the depth of a submarine? Because you think these nuclear submarines that we have that have fought in wars and are spying on other countries, how many can they not go but so far down? Did they say only 2,000 feet, or are they talking about some other submersible?
It says the Navy's Curve 21 ROV can go down to a maximum depth of 20,000 feet.
Okay, so that's further.
Designed for deep ocean salvaging. And they did mention that they have the ROVs going.
Yeah, they did say that. They do have the ROVs going.
They do.
Okay. All right, so we're hoping for a miracle.
We're at 24 hours or less.
Yeah, of air left in this submersible, in this Titanic. I mean, the irony of another tragedy associated with the Titanic.
And it is, like you just said, just to be clear, even if the air does run out per se, I guess that even if it floats to the top, there's absolutely no way for them to open it from the inside. You would think that would be a safety feature, like they would have some kind of wrench that you could turn to open it up.
In a case of emergency,
Well, and if they're all unconscious.
Then you have a problem.
Yep.
Yeah. Scary stuff. Really is. I'll keep you updated, obviously, because this story is being updated by the minute.